One year ends and another year begins. One phase of life passes and moves on to the next. Living with a chronic progressive disease is like that also. New challenges and decisions, often life and death decisions, confront one constantly, especially when one is dealing with dysphagia. Now, this is a condition of impaired and unsafe swallowing. Food and liquid, instead of being swallowed and going down into the stomach, finds its way into the windpipe and heading towards the lungs. Now, this can be pretty risky business because one could choke and one could be asphyxiated, or one could eat less food and as a result become dehydrated and malnourished. Or the foreign matter could enter the lungs and cause a great number of problems. Sue had her first bout of aspiration pneumonia almost 7 years ago, and we would like to share the living that we've been doing since then and how we've handled the problems. The decisions. Firstly, to have the gastric tube. And our current dilemma, whether to have a tracheotomy or let nature take its course. Why not share this part of our journey?
At the 3-year point of Sue's illness, she was already confined to a wheelchair with quadriplegia, had some visual impairment, and could no longer speak. We posed questions requiring yes or no answers, and she responded with a head or eye movement. Many would imagine Sue had nothing to live for. Many would see her only as an unproductive burden. She had been a successful career woman, but now many would only view her and feel for her in terms of lost personhood. But in so doing, they would fail to discover the person who was still there, the person learning to re-actualize herself. Consenting to the insertion of a gastric tube for feeding was Sue's first major decision to fight back against the natural progression of the multiple sclerosis. Though now nourished and hydrated, we could not prevent her from aspirating saliva. We did everything we could to try and reduce the amount that was going to her weakened lungs, but she could not tolerate medication that would help us. So 9 years after diagnosis, it was time for more decisions.
So the doctors have talked about the possibility of doing a tracheostomy. And hopefully that will enable us to keep the airways clear, make it easier for you to breathe, make it easier for us to suction up the secretions from your lungs, and hopefully that way keep the infections down. But it does mean a completely different way of living. Is that what you're prepared to do? That's what you really want. Do you want to live, Sue? Do you really want to keep on living? Yeah. And if it means having a tracheotomy, you're willing to go through that? Yes? Okay. Well, I better find out as much as I can about what it really means so that we're ready.
To willingly prolong one's life in such a dependent condition is not the choice everyone could make. Not every caregiver could face a future handling such a situation. What makes us all so different? What makes some of you say, I could live that life if I had to. I could care. And others are just
praying that this would never happen to them. And still others are recoiling at the thought that this could even be considered living. What makes us all have such different reactions? I do believe that there are 6 factors that influence the ability to be a caregiver successfully and to accept the disabled life.
We must understand that just like being an accomplished mother, caregiving is not instinctual, it is not inherited, it is learned. So the first factor that influences caregiving ability is timing. What were we planning to do with our lives at the time that disability struck? Were we into motherhood or furthering our education? Were we struggling to get to the top of our profession, or were we planning to retire? Were we envisaging doing all the things we had put off all our lives for the sake of others, and now it was going to be our turn? Would these expectations now have to be put on the back burner or abandoned forever when assuming the role?
The loss of our anticipated tomorrows must be grieved. Those who fail to do this grief work will become resentful and bitter when facing their shattered dreams. Most realize that the disabled person must do this grief work, but few caregivers have the time or the support to contemplate their own feelings directly.
The second factor is the attitude towards disease or disability. What do we value most in our society? We seem to put a high price on youth and beauty, productivity, success, power, and independence. Those who cannot attain or fail to maintain these ideals are considered worth less by society. The deformed body is something devoid of all beauty. Such devalued people bring shame to the family. Family shame breeds intolerance and anger. Someone in the caregiving role is often seen as wasting her life. And some religious beliefs reinforce that disease is a punishment. After all, don't we say, "What have you done to deserve this?" Now, some get through the caregiving role because of these beliefs. It is their punishment. It is their sacrifice. It is their duty. Others do learn the joy that can be experienced in the caregiving role. But many see themselves as victims. Some people have had no experience in relating to the disabled and are uncomfortable, embarrassed, and fearful. They cross the road rather than walk by a person in a wheelchair, and some will stare in horror at disfigurement. Others feel revulsion and physical discomfort when dealing with bodily secretions. When handling these stressful situations, they only have their societal learning to fall back on, attitudes learned at the kitchen table, in the classroom, at the gym, and on the job.
When this individual is forced into the caregiving role, how can they be expected automatically to be able to cope?
The third factor has to do with the nature of the previous relationship before the disease struck. It would be hard to bathe the father who abused you when you were a child. It is hard to care when all the caring has already been drained away and there is nothing left. It is difficult to see the joy in caregiving when the personality and behavior has changed so much that the loved one no longer resembles the parent you once knew or the spouse to whom you committed your life. The next factor is knowledge. We come to this role of caregiving without warning, without preparation. We need all the skill and knowledge on the very first day. Without knowledge, we are lost. Without the skill to seek knowledge, we are even more lost. When there are financial and other stresses, and the use of money has to be prioritized, the grandchild's education will take precedent over grandma's need for a new hearing aid. The caregiver is more likely to stay quiet about his or her own needs for fear of being thought selfish. Most people who have never been in the caregiving role 24 hours a day fail to realize the level of stress that responsibility, isolation, unpredictability, and lack of sleep can bring. Caregiver stress is heightened when support systems are lacking, or in environments where to share your problems is to expose your inadequacy. To ask for help is to show that you are a failure. But with supportive systems such as support groups, isolation is reduced, and there can be a productive problem solving. There are day programs and institutional respite. We need respite to restore our wholeness, to restore a wider perspective on life. We need to have the role we play and our feelings validated. Our coping skills will be determined by self-esteem and our experience learnt from handling crises in the past. Are we problem solvers, or are we paralyzed by fear when facing any new situation? Are we worriers who are constantly wondering, what if? Do we have a pessimistic view of the world, so that we know that whatever we attempt will fail, so why try? Whoever we are, we're going to need professional and supportive people around us for this journey. We both come to this place with our values, attitudes, and beliefs firmly entrenched. For the person where disability does not sit well with their values, attitudes, and beliefs, it will be impossible for them to tolerate their disease and their altered functional state. It is essential to remember that all these attitudes and beliefs are just that, attitudes and beliefs. They are not facts. They are only truth because we believe them to be. We can change our attitudes and beliefs. We can go beyond societal values and search for our own value system. We choose to let the attitude that the worth of a disabled person is less than that of an able-bodied one. We choose to feel shame when our bodies are not perfect. We choose to believe that dedicating your life to looking after another is a job without value. It is our choice if we remain victims of these attitudes. And so what skills, values, beliefs, attitudes did Sue and I bring to our table? Sue had been proud of her nursing profession, where she was a carer, a teacher, and a role model. She believed that everyone, no matter what their level of function, had a right to life, and everyone had a purpose in this world. She knew that death was an integral part of life and showed great sensitivity to the dying and their families. She loved life and lived it to the full. She would not tolerate a job half done. She would prefer to do it herself than tolerate mediocrity. And that's how she approached a disabled life also. For me, from the age of 2, I had learned how to cope with being different, a deformed body drawing many "what a shame" from adults and taunts and name-calling from children. My mother was my first caregiving role model, and she taught me that you just don't give up. As an adult, I became an occupational therapist.
with a belief system that was that every problem was solvable, even if the solution was learning to accept the problem.
Professionally, I knew nothing of gastric tubes and oxygen tanks, but I felt I could learn, and at the beginning never doubted I could. However, later I was often overwhelmed, and self-doubt was a reality. Initially, it was hard to adapt to our changed lifestyle, the invasion of our privacy by healthcare professionals and support workers, getting the right equipment and adapting to Sue's fast deterioration. We joined a church that became the center of our spiritual and social lives, and volunteers provided much help. Sue went to a day program and was never alone while I went out to work. We had a busy social calendar and went away on holidays. And to fulfill Sue's desire to continue to make a contribution in this world, we made 3 educational videos on caregiving and living with chronic illness. The road we had traveled so far had taught us 2 truths. Life will be filled with crises, which are merely the challenges we are expected to face. We are not victims of these events, because each that we would face in life would teach us the lesson needed to continue the journey. We also learned to accept the impermanence of all things in life. People, security, situations are here with us for the long term or the short term, but nothing is forever. We must spend our lives letting go of the old and embracing the new. We cannot bring the new into our reality until we have let go. We don't like letting go. We dislike change. But sooner or later, we walk hesitantly or are dragged to confront the new reality. Change is inevitable. We trusted we were on the right path.
Do we embark on this journey in fear or in faith? If it is in fear, then it will be a predictably negative experience. Both the caregiver and the partner in care will feel victimized and have wasted lives. It will further the societal belief that the worth of a disabled person is worth less than that of an able-bodied one, and that the life of an invalid, oh how I hate that word, is invalid. If this is the attitude, then there can be no sense of accomplishment, no motivation to succeed and discover, and certainly no ability to risk. Fatigue and depression will be constant companions. But if, on the other hand, we are embarking on a journey in faith, and I'm not talking old-time religion here, but then we are embarking on a journey to feel comfortable with life's mystery, perhaps to understand life's purpose and the destiny that was intended for us. Hope, therefore, becomes our constant companion.
An energizing force which is driven by faith, faith either in ourselves or in our higher power or both. With faith in ourselves, we will be armed with the tools for survival. We will be able to take advantage of all help that is available. We will be empowered to meet challenges. We will discover our own potential and learn self-mastery over our lives. Hope lets us risk to imagine that this crisis road upon which we travel will have meaning. When our hope is driven by faith in our higher power, we are blessed with the knowledge that we are not alone, that our struggle is being monitored, and we will be shown the right road to take.
Hope, therefore, is a word of action propelling us through life.
But hope's shield is constantly being tested.
You know, it seems to me that you're the one with the surgery coming up, and you're the one that's sort of saying, let's get this show on the road. I want to start my new phase in life better than I was before. It's sort of the message that you keep giving me. Is that the real one? Yeah. I'm the one that's doubting. I'm the one that's always worrying for both of us. I'm the one that's always feeling as if I'm running out of time. Like there's things that have to be said. I don't know why I should feel that way, because I'll be able to say them, but maybe it is that I know that when you go in for the anesthetic, there's going to be some time there when I'm really not going to get a response from you. You'll hear me, but you probably won't be able to respond to me. That scares me, that I really won't be able to know how you're feeling and how things are going. I guess I'm just afraid of that time when we don't have a communication. You know what I mean? There's always at times like this when I'm feeling scared, I guess, that I always think of the things that have done wrong. Am I boring you? Or are you really just telling me I always make a mountain out of a molehill? Is that what you're telling me? That I shouldn't be worrying? Is that what you're telling me? You're not telling me that. That I have a right to worry if I want to? Oh, thanks. Oh dear. And it's at times like this that I think back to all the times when I perhaps wasn't a good caregiver. This is my sort of feel guilty time, I guess. Am I a silly old fool for thinking this way? No. Susie, you never make me feel sad for long. You have just got a wonderful, wonderful way of putting everything into perspective. Maybe you're right. Maybe we just live each day as it comes. Is that what you always try and teach me? Yeah. I guess that's what we have to teach other people too. Is that what you want to teach other people? Yep. Yep.
I had no doubt that this was the path I was supposed to be walking. This was my destiny, and its purpose would be shown to me all in good time. Hope empowered me to meet the challenge. With an unknown future, we took advantage of that spring. We embraced each day as if it was our last. My unconscious mind needed some peace. For me, it comes in the form of symbols. Sue and I could communicate through the planting of a young apricot tree in our garden. We didn't have to talk about its meaning. We took from its planting what we each wanted. I needed a tree of life. It was held in place by tubing from Sue's gastric feeding bags. Now, Martha Stewart would have thought this a very good thing. And actually, we found that the tubing is very useful for many gardening jobs.
I had never been in a surgical intensive care unit before. I had never seen a person still under the influence of anesthetic, a machine breathing for them.
This experience was not wasted. It prepared me for the same situation a year later when my mother underwent heart surgery. The second time around, it was not nearly so scary. But what a fighter Sue was. How quickly she recovered. She was soon awake and healthily coughing up secretions, clearing her lungs. And within 24 hours, she was breathing on her own and transferred to a regular ward. Now I had to learn my new skills. Suctioning would be a clean-gloved procedure through the trach, and not in the back of Sue's mouth as before. Then I would learn the sterile procedure of removing the trach's inner tube and cleaning and replacing it. This would be done twice a day from now on. I was not confident. Sue's life depended on my ability, but hope allowed me to believe that I would never be tested beyond my capabilities. With this trach, Sue had made a statement for life, a life that society had already devalued. Even though we had entered a world many would have difficulty sharing, we were blessed by those who wanted to come with us, to grow, to be inspired, and we were blessed with an energy that hope provided. We lived in walking distance of the hospital, and so, on a wonderful spring day, Sue came home, and the next phase of our life began.